Hello and welcome to the Hoop Collective podcast. We talk about the NBA, which we are doing on Sunday evening. I'm going to talk as best I can. I'm very clearly fighting through an illness which wiped out the last several days of work. So thank you. I'm sure Bontemps and MacMahon are very excited that I can't talk that much. Without further ado, joining us from New York City, where he is just back from Philadelphia after attending the Grizzlies 76ers game on Saturday night. Nothing happened during or before or after that game, right, Tim Bontemps?
Yeah, very boring night in Philly per usual. Hello, everybody.
Joining us from the American Airlines Center in Dallas, Texas, where he watched the Dallas Mavericks beat the shorthanded Orlando Magic on Sunday night after spending the week in Minnesota, is Ben MacMahon.
Howdy, partners. Wendy, I wasn't going to tell you this, but I'll just let loose a little bit. When we were up there in Akron after that live show, actually it was after the AA game, old Bontemps, I got a few brewskis in him, and he told me that he thought the bobblehead, the famous Wendy bobblehead, might have some little voodoo doll type of powers. So he's been sprinkling the voodoo on the throat area. Next thing you know, you couldn't talk because Bontemps was trying to take over the pod, baby. It was a Bontemps takeover attempt.
So
there was not actually, but sure.
On Friday, I was in LA, and in the morning I was a little hoarse. By mid-morning, we were doing our Zoom calls about the shows that day. It was getting a little bit worrisome. I was like, wow, you're sort of cutting out. Malika was like, I was getting all these remedies, like, get on the honey and hot water and blah, blah, blah. When that NBA Today show started at noon, it was a disaster. I made it through one segment and they yanked me like a starting pitcher that had nothing. And, in baseball, they make you pitch to three guys now. I had to get through the first segment. It was a disaster.
No. You're a one pitch guy. That's it. You bounce the first pitch and that's that.
You're not kidding. I would have killed to bounce it. It wasn't even getting out of my hand. It was going straight in the ground. So anyway, Saturday night, the Grizzlies beat the Paul George and Joel Embiid-less 76ers relatively easily. John Morant had a triple-double in 29 minutes, I believe, or give or take. It was a very good, maybe that was the previous game, but he's playing very well. Not an unexpected result with the way the 76ers are missing their players. And then Bontemps, things went sideways. So maybe you can detail how it all went down.
Sure. There's a columnist in Philly, Marcus Hayes. He wrote a column, mentioned Joel Embiid's dead brother and son. Joel took exception to it. He hadn't seen him yet. Marcus came in the locker room after the game. Joel yelled at him. I was not there. There was a back and forth. They exchanged words. At some point, Joel shoved him. That's the extent of that. I think anyone who's listening is aware of that, but if they're not, now they're aware.
Well, the issue is two issues with Embiid. That in and of itself, an altercation with a media member, it's, you don't want the physical contact. That's not a good thing. The league is investigating that.
You can't put your hands on anybody.
Correct.
It's not like you don't want it. You can't put your hands on anybody.
The issue that's really coming up with Embiid right now is that he gave an interview on Friday. It was the first time he'd talked in a month. And in that interview, he talked about how difficult this particular ramp up has been for him mentally. He talked about how coming back and preparing for the season on his knee right now is harder than it's been in the past. And this Bontemps is where I think a lot of the frustration is resulting from, separate from the fact that the columnist mentioned his brother who's passed away when he was a rookie or first-year players in a car accident. I think the issue here is an issue of clarity and messaging, because Joel has not disclosed or talked about there being some sort of injury. The way this was messaged from the start of the season, including stories and interviews he's done with you, is that this was part of a process to protect himself for long term. And that's why I think people were getting frustrated, because it seemed like he was sort of just taking a conservative approach to the season to protect himself, which has its merits. But now he's talking about a mental issue that was stemmed from his concern over his knee. That is two different things. And so this lack of clarity, I think, is at the root of this. And I think Philadelphia fans see him play in the Olympics, which he tried to explain the difference between playing in the Olympics, which was a 10 or 12-minute stint, versus what it takes to play in an NBA game, which of course is true. But they see him play in the Olympics. They see him get a contract extension. They see him sort of announce that he's not going to play in back-to-backs for protection. And then when he gets really heavily criticized for that, not just from the media, but from fans and from peers, then he comes out and gives sort of a different story. So I'm not saying any of it is wrong or any of it is unfair or whatever, but I think that's what the root of this is. And this messaging and lack of clarity, I think, is causing all the consternation.
I mean, I think the consternation is the team is 1-4. They're not very good when Joel and Paul George don't play. There hasn't been any real clarity on when he's going to play, because it's a matter of when he feels like his knee is good enough to play. So, yeah, like, I would say
Right, but
there's a lot
there's
of
no
frustration.
announced injury.
Well, there isn't an injury. That's the whole thing. Like,
Right,
I don't.
but okay, but then he's saying, "I'm mentally not. I can't trust it." So that's not healthy.
Look, he's missed almost half the games he's ever played. He's got a knee that he has had surgery on multiple times. Like this is what we've been talking about going back to the beginning of October. Like, yes, you're right. The lack of clarity is part of why there's frustration in Philly. This is also like not news. Like, this is how it's been. It's probably how it's going to be. It's probably going to continue to be frustrating. And it would be a lot less frustrating. There'd be a lot less tension if they weren't 1-4. They're now 1-4. So, Paul George is going to be back on Monday in Phoenix, barring any kind of setback today. Got upgraded to questionable. If he gets through shoot around and stuff tomorrow or Monday, fine. Then he'll be good to go and he'll play. And we'll see if Joel gets suspended or when he gets suspended by the league after this incident on Saturday.
You think he'll get suspended?
I do.
I would assume he will get suspended. I don't know for sure.
Just because of the precedent it sets. And
yes,
look, honestly, there's nobody who was in the right in this situation, because you're a columnist. It's your job to call it like you see it and be critical at times. Look, I think each one of us have been in situations where players, superstars even, have been upset with us and have publicly expressed that or whatever. If you're going to be critical of a player, there's no reason to drag family into it. That's over the line, especially a deceased brother, his young son. It's in poor taste.
Especially if you know anything about Joel. I mean, you don't even have to know him that well to know what that all means to him. So
honestly, to bring family into a situation, unless it's something where you're portraying the family in a good light, I think it's probably out of line. There are exceptions where, perhaps there's legal situations and but that's not what happened here. It was just a over the line kind of. I don't blame Embiid for feeling like, dude, that's a real cheap shot.
The column was bad. The references got deleted. He has apologized. Marcus Hayes messed up with that. He's admitted he messed up with that. You also can't put your hands on the guy.
Exactly.
That whole part of this thing is a 5-second discussion. It's very simple. The bigger problem is, again, the reason there's all of this frustration in Philadelphia is less because Joel is not playing and more because Joel is not playing and the team stinks. If they were 4-1, this would all look different. Just like when, to go back to the story I wrote, and Nick Nurse himself said it, the Kawhi plan worked because the Raptors were 17-5 in the 22 games Kawhi Leonard didn't play. These
Right.
guys are 1-4 in the 5 games that Joel Embiid and Paul George haven't played. That winning percentage ain't going to cut it. And we're going to talk about other teams who are healthy and struggling that have less to fall back on than a team that's 2 of its 3 best players are hurt. So naturally, it's not looking very good. But that combined with the fact that there isn't hey, like Paul George stepped funny in a preseason game, had his leg bent sideways, got a bone bruise in his knee. That's a very easy thing to identify. The other guy has a knee that's chronically sore and messed up at this point because he's had multiple injuries to it, and he's missed almost half the games he's ever been eligible to play. So it's not a clear situation. It's also not like the Kawhi situation, like we've talked about, where Kawhi seemingly is nowhere near playing.
Right.
Well, is near playing. I think he'll be back soon, again, depending on how many games he's suspended for. But until he's on the court, you're going to have this murkiness around the whole thing, which is hard for everybody to deal with. And when he comes back and plays, you're still going to be wondering how many games he's going to be able to play before he has an issue. Like, this is the new reality they're stuck with.
They haven't exactly been forthcoming, to say the least. And how much of that is because they don't want to be forthcoming versus they just don't know? I don't know the answer to that.
I think it's because if you look at Joel's history, he has always been reticent for anybody to know what's going on with his injury stuff. Go back to the spring when he had the surgery on his knee, and it was, I don't remember what they called it, a procedure. Like, it's a lot like the Kawhi stuff. There's just like a lack of clear information. And when there's a lack of clear information, it leads to more questions, and then you go around in a circle. And that's the same thing that's
happening. Can I tell you
here.
something, Bontemps? Like a couple weeks ago, I think it was right before the season opener, when it seemed like he might play because there was no clarity. When actually there was no intention of him playing anytime soon. But put that aside. You described what happens in a typical Philadelphia 76ers pregame. And in all honesty, out of everything I've heard, the Joel Embiid sphere about all of this fall, this had the most clarity I've ever heard on the topic. And I almost would suggest the 76ers do exactly what you described, which is you watch Joel Embiid warm up, and he basically says yay or nay. And like, if they would just
he's questionable for 75% of the games that he plays. Okay. He goes out and warms up. He comes in, he does this or does this, and then he plays or doesn't.
And you know what? Maybe that's exactly what they should just say. He will be a game time decision going forward.
Well, that is basically what they've said. The problem is he hasn't gotten to that point
That's
yet.
not what they've said. That's not what they've said.
Well, I mean, look.
He wasn't on the injury report during the preseason, and then all of a sudden he's been out. So that is not what they've said.
Well, he was on the injury report. I mean, it wasn't like they said he was going to play and then he didn't. They said he was out every game. I'm not trying to turn this into some like Joel Embiid injury saga.
Right, fine.
He's been out for a month. The issue is
he's been out for a month.
That nobody knows exactly when it's going to end. So every day you then ask, is there an update? The answer is no. And then Nick Nurse is frustrated. The media is frustrated. Everybody's frustrated.
Yeah, Nick Nurse the other day, he looked like, I was like, when he was having to deal with he looked like Ty Lue. Like, remember Ty Lue got so frustrated with having to answer Kawhi Leonard and Paul George questions that he just punted it off to Lawrence Frank. I felt for Nick Nurse because he was like trying to answer Paul George and Kawhi Leonard questions. Except for this time was Paul George and Joel Embiid questions. And he was just like, you got the update. What do you want from me?
And honestly, that does get tiresome to talk about, but
I'm tired of talking about
frustration
it. I'm sure they're tired of talking
all that
about
frustration played a role in this. It played a role in the coverage. It played a role in Embiid's response. But there was a critical column that took what Embiid felt like were personal shots by involving his family. And Embiid reacted poorly. The right way to react there is to have PR set up a one-on-one conversation where you air your grievances in a forceful but peaceful manner. It became this public spectacle. And then, the league can't have players putting their hands on reporters. So I think that Embiid's probably going to get hit with a game. I think whenever he's ready to play, it's probably going to be delayed by another game because of this.
Yeah, I mean, there's like stories about this kind of thing happening back in the day. Like my former colleague at the New York Post, Steve Serby, he got famously put in a locker by Richard Todd, the quarterback of the Jets, 40 years ago. But this is like in a completely different era in every level. And there's
Well,
I don't remember any situation like this in recent NBA history to even go back to say, hey, like this is the comparison that there'd be some sort of punishment. Like I don't know how they're going to handle it. Other than I would agree with you, you'd think you would set a precedent of we're not going to condone this.
well, you know the story about Will McDonough, the legendary sports writer and the father of former Suns
Yes,
GM Ryan McDonough.
that's a good story.
Apparently, the story is he got the best of a star New England Patriots defensive back. Apparently, he punched the guy out. Now, I don't think we want to go back to those. I don't necessarily want to test my my odds against any of these players. So I'm not suggesting that, but it is a story from a different time.
Well, MacMahon, you've been involved in some uncomfortable situations in locker room or press conference settings before.
I've actually only once in my life had a player take an aggressive posture to me, indicating something physical might occur. And this was a player who was not in a good mind frame, who was coming back from a post All-Star break sabbatical, and who didn't, inform me while they were shooting free throws at the end of practice that my mouth had runneth over, was the exact quote, and that he was going to wanted to talk to me after practice, which I was fine. He walked right past me up the stairs and said, if I wanted to talk, and he charged back down. Oh, then I told him in so many words that it was pretty unbelievable that he had taken an unplanned sabbatical and was questioning my integrity. And then he charged back down the stairs, and
you can always count on MacMahon to de-escalate Bontemps.
He's such a de-escalator.
This was a while back. People probably can figure out who it was, just by the sabbatical part of it. But yeah, and we've all had players get mad at us in press conference settings, and want to show us up or whatever. Like that's part of the job. That happens. My thing is, was I fair? Was I accurate? If I can answer yes to those two things, then okay, like I'll just try to avoid my Twitter mentions for the next 24 hours. But yeah, I mean, that part is part of the job. And honestly, Embiid he made a scene. It would not have been any big deal whatsoever. Nobody probably would have even said anything about it publicly until you put your hands on the reporter. And then it's like, come on, man. Like,
nobody would have known it happened otherwise, because you just can't
right. It would have been like a inside Philly media discussion. And
but I mean, that's
thing.
all it would have been. And it would have just been that. And now, I mean, the irony of it is this column that nobody knew anything about, frankly, outside of a very small sphere in Philly. Now the whole country knows about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not an enjoyable situation, but I actually prefer, if a player or coach or executive, whatever, is upset with me, I prefer that they speak to me about it.
Yeah, but my thing is, speak to me about it. Let's not. And I've said this last year when there was a situation where a player was upset and the whole world knew about it. After things had calmed down several days later, I said, "Hey, if that happens in the future and you're upset with me, I'd much rather have a conversation like this than in front of a public audience, because I know it doesn't help me if it's a big public display, and I don't think it helps the player either."
Yeah, I mean, I have no problem with the idea that players and organizations should hold media accountable, since it goes both ways.
And that's a big part of media having access. And that's a part of, like, hey, if you're going to write something harsh or write something critical, like, you're there and you're available to them. You're accessible to them if they want to have a conversation, or if they want to, if they want to yell at you or just discuss it. I mean, look, I walked into shoot around the other day, and there was a player who kind of called me over and we had a conversation about a lot of the discussion we've had about that particular player on this podcast. That's part of it.
Anytime you say something or write something, one of the first things you're supposed to do is show up. As you said, we've all been in that spot many times. We'll be in that spot many times again. It's just part of the job. But you also can't put your hands on anybody. And again, all of this only really, it's all sort of a side story to the fact that this team that went out and added all these pieces this summer that did as well as they could have, I think, realistically in free agency. The idea was, well, we can, even going back to this story I wrote that we've talked about a bunch, we can be judicious resting these guys. We have Andre Drummond. We have these other players. We can get through the season. Well, through 10 days, it ain't looking great. And again, there's other teams that are in worse situations because they're not injured and they're playing bad, but doesn't mean this situation's good. It's not good.
Yeah.
They need these guys back as soon as they can. And by the way, it should be said, they're not going out west to play Phoenix, the Clippers, and the Lakers. It could easily be 1-7.
Well, and at a certain point, sooner than later, the way things are going, like they're going to be in jeopardy of being able to even make the playoffs.
2 weeks in, but there's only 4 East teams over 500.
Yeah.
So I will just say that, Joel over the summer, it was a challenging situation for him in France because he had elected to play, for the Americans over the French. And he got asked about that routinely. He got booed heavily. He and his teammates leaned into it. He was, he dealt with an illness that affected his effectiveness for a while. And he handled every single bit of that with total professionalism. And came out of it saying how great of an experience it was. And he had, Tatum with his playing time had a difficult Olympics, but of the sort of dealing with stuff, Embiid had as difficult of an Olympics as just about anybody. And he never once wavered in being a total pro. So, and then, what he said on Friday when he defended himself with all of the things that he had played through, he has a very good point about coming back from the orbital bone fracture, and he played with Bell's palsy throughout the playoffs last year. My God, which he didn't even, when he was talking about the stuff he played through, all the injuries and stuff, he didn't even mention the Bell's palsy thing, which is something I'd never even seen before. And he was very effective despite all that.
And the question of his conditioning, I mean, there's no question that has been a legitimate issue in the past. Is conditioning a factor right now with this particular mysterious medical situation?
I think he explained. I think he doesn't. He said mentally he's having a difficult time trusting the leg. I think if he had said that a month ago, this would have all been viewed differently. But whatever. I'm just saying, Embiid has a history of being able to handle tough situations.
Yeah.
I'm not taking a side here. I'm just saying.
Well, he lost his cool in this situation.
Yeah, I'm just saying
it's going to cost him probably some playing time and certainly some money.
All right. Okay, let's move on. Saturday night, the Milwaukee Bucks were facing, a fair amount of adversity. They had started the season 1-4. Chris Middleton, there's still no clarity on when he's going to be able to come back. They get the Cleveland Cavs in town. Dame Lillard was coming off a game where he went 1 of 12. I think he had 4 points, 3 or 4 points. One of the worst games he's had as a Buck. They're catching the Cavs on the second night of a back-to-back, third game in 4 nights. And this is a sort of a classic situation you see in the NBA, especially in the regular season. You see a team in a classic bounce back situation, especially playing at home. And guess what? Dame Lillard bounced back.
Big time.
He hit 10 threes, tying the team record. He scored 18 points in the first quarter. And in the end, Donovan Mitchell hit a shot with less than a second left for the Cavs to win by a point. The Cavs moved to 7.
Bucks' 2 stars combined for 75 points efficiently with 18 assists, and they lost to fall to 1 and whatever the hell it is now.
Yeah, Giannis had 34 and
1
16.
and 5.
34
By the way, their
16.
one win came against the Sixers in the first game of the season
Yeah.
without Paul George and Joel Embiid.
Well,
And since
and
then,
look,
they have lost to the Nets. They've lost to the Bulls. They've lost to half the Grizzlies. They've lost the Cavs on a back-to-back. It hasn't been great.
And in fairly significantly due to the fact that Giannis has allowed this to fester and fester and fester repeatedly over the years, there is this black cloud lingering of, is Giannis going to finally ask out? Is Giannis going to finally ask out? Is Giannis going to finally ask out? Like, that's a factor.
Well, I don't know if he's let it linger. He's signed multiple extensions. I mean,
Oh, he hasn't let it linger? Are you serious? How many times has Giannis publicly entertained the possibility?
I don't know, man. I've seen a lot worse. The guy has signed all these extensions. He doesn't had to. Last 2 times he signed extensions, he rightfully should have waited another year.
Yeah, and when did he sign those extensions? Right after they traded for Drew
Look,
Holiday, and right after they traded for
that's a
Damian
different
Lillard.
topic.
Let's skip past the extension talk.
Is there not a ton of noise around that whole situation?
But that's not the important thing to focus on right now. Is this team cannot guard anybody.
Nobody.
Like forget about what could happen with transactions in the future. Let's talk about the present. We just talked about the Sixers. They have these 2 guys out. They've had a disastrous start. They can at least say, if we get our guys back, we could be okay. If you're the Bucks right now, you're 1-5. Your last 2 games, you played teams when you were rested that played the night before. You've lost both games. They lost to the Nets and Bulls and got lit up by their guards in both games. Obviously, no, it's not a crime to lose to the Boston Celtics on the second night of a back-to-back in Boston. That's fine. All these other losses, you'd look at the schedule before the season started, you would say the Bucks are going to be 5-3 or I guess 4-2, 5-1 after these 6 games. They got a bunch of rest advantage games. The Sixers are banged up at the start of the year. Great chance for the Bucks to get off to a good start. Instead, they've lost 5 in a row. Their perimeter athleticism has looked every bit as bad as we talked about it was 2 months ago. They can't stay in front of anybody. They got Cam Thomas and Kobe White and Dennis Schroeder and Josh Giddey and Zach LaVine, John Morant, Donovan Mitchell. Name the guy who they're going against. It's a field day for them. And when you look at this team, what's the fix? There isn't a fix. There's not a lever to pull to say this is what's going to work.
You could talk about Chris Middleton coming back, but like Chris Middleton ramping up, and he's not the guy. He's not the guy he used to be. Like, he's not.
Chris Middleton is not solving the perimeter athleticism and defense problem. He's still a very good scorer. They might have won last night because the rest of their team wouldn't have scored a combined 38 points, but they're still not going to solve their problem, which is how do they guard people?
One of my big things, my takeaways from this game, Giannis played 39 minutes. Dame played 39 minutes. Brook Lopez, what is he, 35, 36? He played 35 minutes. And I'm going to tell you, watching them play, Brook Lopez is playing his ass off on the defensive end. He is saving them with his superior help defense and protecting of the rim. My God, if anything happens to him, they're going to be in a world of trouble.
Well, and look, the Bucks need Gary Trent Jr. to be the best minimum signing in the league. They need him to play his way to where he's going to be a very attractive free agent again next summer. Right now, 6 games into the season, he's shooting 31% from the floor, 25% from three-point range, and he's tasked with taking the toughest perimeter defensive assignment every night and is getting just flame broiled. That's not been a good situation.
Yeah. So when you look at the Bucks, they're in year 7 of their compete for a championship window. I think 3 different times in there, they've won 58 games or more. And that wasn't even the year that they won the title. They won the title. It was a shortened season.
Mm-hmm.
I think they were 20 games over 500, but they didn't have their best regular season. So this window is, they've had a lot going here. They won the title, obviously, in 21. In 22, Middleton got hurt. They lost to the team in 7 games, the Celtics, that made the finals. Middleton doesn't get hurt. I think there's a good chance they're back in the finals. I don't know if they beat the Warriors, but I think they're back. They were up 3-2 in that series. In 23, they are a 58-win team. Giannis's numbers are as good as they've ever been, as good as his MVP seasons. He didn't win the MVP, but 58 wins, number one overall seed, I believe, in the whole tournament, but certainly in the East. Giannis gets hurt. They lose in the first round to the team that ends up in the finals, the Heat. I don't know what would happen if Giannis didn't get hurt, but I don't think they'd have lost that series. 2024, Giannis, again, they're not as good of a team. They obviously changed the coach. They have the issues with the changeover of another coach with Doc Rivers coming in. Not their strongest team, but they lose in the first round because Giannis is hurt. I don't think they.
You know what though? They weren't good last year. They were bad enough to get the coach fired, and then they were worse after the new.
They're
coach
not beating the
came in.
Celtics, but my point is, if you look at that 7 years, they've had several years in there where they might have won again, but they had unfortunate injury luck.
Mm-hmm.
They're just not teams. It's just so hard to keep your window open this long.
Yeah.
And
especially in a small market, if we're being honest.
If you do it, you need something unexpectedly special to happen. For example, you draft Kawhi Leonard with the 15th pick, something like that, which is how the Spurs elongated their championship window.
I mean, I will say the Bucks had two pretty special things happen. They drafted Giannis with the 15th overall pick, and then they got Chris Middleton as a complete afterthought, second team.
That's how they won the title. But I'm saying to stretch it out. So they're in a situation right now, as Bontemps said. So they are, I believe, so they're in the second apron. They have a $75 million tax payment due this year. They don't control their first round picks for the next 6 years. They've either traded them away or traded the swap rights. So there's nothing for them to do with that. They don't even have a second round pick. I think they may have a second round pick in like 2032, but their next 6 second round picks have all been traded.
Mm-hmm.
They have gassed this everything they had to invest in this window. The last giant piece being
Dame.
I mean, didn't they trade like 4 second round picks for Jay Crowder like a year and a half ago or something like that?
Might have been 5. It was a lot.
So I'm saying, like, they've just done. If they're not good enough anymore, then they're not good enough anymore. It's not a character flaw. It's not.
Windows close. But when windows close, superstars who are putting up 31, 12, and 6 on 63% shooting and are still very much in their prime typically don't stick around.
Well, I don't think we're there yet, but I can understand why that conversation is existing. I felt that this Bucks team was going to be very competitive because I actually felt that there was some evidence last year that Dame and Giannis together could work, but so far it's just not. And so they're gonna have a little bit of a grace period because no Middleton, but Middleton spoke for the first time in a month also, I believe on Thursday or Friday. And he basically did not offer a timetable. He just said, I'm not ready. I'm getting better every day, but I'm not ready. And,
obviously I was way too high in the Bucks last year, going back to the wins pool draft where I took them number 1. I thought that Dame and Giannis would just be so freaking good offensively together. And they were okay last year, pretty good. It's scary that they can go for 75 points and 18 assists and still lose this year, but whatever. I overestimated how awesome they would be offensively for sure. And then I underestimated just how much this team would sorely miss Drew Holiday. Well, I respected his game, but
that's a win for this guy.
Yeah, it is. And
wow, I got an initiative that. That's a big day, Brian. That's a big day.
There's no denying it. Look, Drew Holiday, I mean, listen, you trade for Drew Holiday, you win a championship. That's the NBA. That's the NBA
that
rule,
is true.
Right? I guess New Orleans didn't benefit quite that much, but they went from being an outstanding defensive team to an awful defensive team. And there's other things. There's that's not just
Yeah,
bringing in
Middleton
Dame for Drew
went from
Holiday.
being an excellent defender to being
Yeah,
either injured or not effective.
but they went from having the best point of attack perimeter defender in the league, arguably, to having just a massive void in that very, very major role.
Well, and they also went from having a group of guys around Giannis who sort of every day would conform to whatever they needed to do to make things work around Giannis on a daily basis, to trading for a guy, Damian Lillard, who showed up thinking fairly, because of his track record, that this was like a two-headed monster there, and it was like him and Giannis, and they were going to be like the two alphas, to go back to the old Chicago three alphas thing. And like, it's just never really felt like that from the beginning. It's always been Giannis's show there. And, it's been clunky from the beginning going. And obviously they won 80% of their games with Adrian Griffin. They've been under 500 with Doc since they had the injuries in the first round. Like, there's been all sorts of extenuating circumstances all the way through. But I just keep going back to, and I'm surprised by it because I saw him opening night. Yes, the Sixers had guys out, but Dame and Giannis looked great. They ended up pulling away. They win by 30. I was like, all right, Bucks are going to be off to a good start. They got Chicago and Brooklyn coming up. I'm going to see them in Boston. Might see them in Brooklyn and Boston. They'll be 3-0. See them a couple undefeated teams against the Celtics. We'll see how it goes. And instead, it's been anything but that ever since. And it's just very hard to see when you look at this team. Like, what can you do schematically? What can you do rotation-wise? Like, you could play Andre Jackson more, I guess. Like, he's a young, athletic guy. You can try to have him out there. Maybe you start him instead of Gary Trent. Maybe you try to do something else. They just turned down Marjan Beauchamp's fourth-year player option. They clearly don't see him as a long-term fit there. They haven't done a great job building out the back half of the roster. It's like some of these later LeBron teams where you sacrifice a bunch of draft picks over time. Understandably, they won a title, but you don't have a lot of depth coming in behind them. And now it's like you look around, it's just very hard to make a move that's going to fix this problem. And as you guys know, you look at the NBA now, just about every team has one or two or three guys who are on the perimeter who are explosive, who can do stuff with the ball. And they just don't have a great answer on any night for any of them.
And they play in Cleveland on Monday, the home and home. The whole league plays Monday, if I'm not mistaken, because everybody's off.
Because there's no game. I think everybody plays Monday and Wednesday because there's no games Tuesday for the election. And then they play over the next three games, Boston and New York, sandwiched around a game against the Jazz, who are winless, obviously. So we could be looking at a scenario where they're very easily 2-8 through 10 games with their two guys healthy. That is certainly not what anybody anywhere would have forecasted 10 days ago.
And they're 21st in offense.
21st in offense. That's rough. Wow. We should note that Donovan Mitchell did put himself in the lead for the Cojones Factor Player of the Month with the shot at the end there. When that possession, everything went wrong. And he
almost lost the ball twice.
Yeah. And then he just grabbed the ball, got his feet set, and let it go. I had a scout tonight ask me why Damian Lillard was on the floor for a win or lose defensive possession at the end of the game. I don't have a good answer for that, but I've had somebody bring that up.
Donovan, it wasn't bad defense on that play. Donovan just made a play because he's a superstar.
Well, it was actually pretty good defense because Donovan almost lost the ball twice and sort of double clutched it and flung it up. And I mean, it was a heck of a play to get it done, but I thought 2 or 3 times it was going to end him turning the ball over. It was
and Dame
just sort of
hit
fitting
a shot
for where the Bucks are at right now.
Yeah, they ran a beautiful set. Not beautiful, but they ran a very effective set that created an open look for Dame with 9 seconds left, and he hit just easy shot to give the Bucks the lead. So the Cavs are 7-0. They've played 7 games in 11 days. No one else in the league, I think, has played that tight, because I think the only other team that's played 7 games is Boston. And Boston got on ring night. They got, so they played 7 games in 12 days. So Cavs have played 4 road games, won them all. Obviously, they're undefeated, 7-0. This last week, Bontemps, you described how this would be like a real test for them. They won in New York coming from behind. They beat the Lakers, just pounded the Lakers. The win over the Magic, the game lost its edge when Paolo Banchero was lost that day. A big bummer. But Then they go into Milwaukee and in the game where Dame came out on fire, scored 18 points in the first quarter, and they come back and they win on the road, got it out. They're getting contributions up and down the lineup. One of the things that they've been trying to do and being effective at it has been limiting Donovan Mitchell's minutes and limiting the load on him. One of the things that happened last year, they had so many injuries. Darius Garland missed a bunch of time. Karis LeVert had injuries. Ty Jerome, who was going to be their sort of backup guard, missed pretty much the whole season with an ankle injury. So Donovan had to basically play point guard a lot. He was playing some heavy minute games, started dealing with a knee injury. So one of the things that they want to do is reduce the load on Donovan Mitchell. And it's been working. Darius Garland is off to a good start. He had a terrific game in New York last week. They've been running the ball through Evan Mobley more. And they've even been getting contributions from Sam Merrill, Sudden Sam Merrill, who was a guy I think they picked up off waivers essentially last year, or maybe it was 2 years ago. He had 17 points in Milwaukee on Saturday night, hit 5 threes. And Karis LeVert has been hot, although right now he's dealing with a little bit of a knee injury. Just tremendous performance by everybody in the lineup. Plus, the other thing is, even though they've got a new head coach, they have continuity on their side. And this is, you often see teams that get off to good starts. Obviously, the Celtics are a great team. They have continuity on their side. Teams that have continuity on their side have a better chance of getting off to a good start. I think even Phoenix, even though they have a couple of new players, Phoenix is 5-1. They have continuity on their side. Oklahoma City, a great team. Isaiah Hartenstein's not playing yet, so it's essentially the same roster.
Plus Caruso, which is just a perfect role player upgrade.
So the continuity makes a big difference, and I think that's contributing for the Cavs right now. In addition to the fact that, they're developing some of their guys a little bit. They're opening up some of their guys' skill sets. Sam Merrill being one of them. They run plays for Sam Merrill now that are not just threes. They look for him in other ways. So I don't know how long it'll last. I don't know. I mean, the thing that's going for the Cavs right now is that the other East teams that we expected to challenge with them are all in some level of trouble.
Aside from the Celtics.
Well, yeah. I don't look at the Cavs and the Celtics in the same plane. I was talking about
you're talking about the
76ers,
the tier right below the Celtics.
And even
the tier
and
underneath
even the Magic,
Celtics.
who I think the Magic, they're going to lose Banchero for 4 to 6. I mean, it's going to be long.
Yeah, I mean, Tim saw the Magic tonight in Dallas. They're going to struggle without Paolo.
And Wendell Carter Jr. went out with a plantar fascia strain, and those can be pesky.
He looked like he looked like a guy who was in a lot of discomfort on the sideline and knew he might be out for a while. And as a guy who has unfortunately dealt with a bunch of injuries. So, yeah, look, if you're
even
Cavs
Indiana,
fan,
by the way.
Well, we'll get to Indiana, I think, in a minute. But if you look at the Cavs, like when we came into the season, we talked about the fact that for these teams at the top, and Tim brought it up right away, the Knicks, the Bucks, and the Sixers. Everybody knew, barring something crazy, the Celtics are going to be right at the top somewhere.
Yeah.
But those three teams after that, between thin rosters, older players, and injury-prone players, there was potential there for things to get wonky and for these younger teams behind them to take a jump up. And Orlando looked like it could do that the way Paolo was playing. Now it could be harder depending on how long he's out. And Indiana and Miami have been meh. But the Cleveland Cavaliers have been awesome. And right now, if you look at it, it's hard to see a scenario to me where, barring things going really sideways for them injury-wise, that they don't have home court in the first round. And with the distance they're putting at the top now, they could very easily be looking at a top 2 seed at the end of the regular season, which would be huge for them.
Well, it's hard to say in the first week of November, but...
Oh, but they've won 10%. If they win on Monday, they've won 10% of their games to start the season. Like that's... like if you have a 5-game lead now, like they're already up 5 games in the loss column on the Bucks. They'll be up 6 if they win on Monday.
Listen,
They could be up 5 on Philly if the Sixers losing Phoenix on Monday. That's a huge advantage, whether it's 10 days in the season or 2 months into the season.
Wendy, you have already predicted that they'll be raising an NBA Cup ribbon to the rafters.
Well, I was saying that they should be a contender to win that thing.
No, you said they were going to get the ribbon. And so if they're ribbon,
I said they were contenders. They should
your
try
thing.
to.
Your
if
thing
they're
of calling
ribbon
that the
contenders
ribbon
and they're top
is
2 seed contenders.
you have a lot of bad running jokes. Your calling of that repeatedly the ribbon is one of your best ones. It's quite good.
Listen, I think the league office is going to start using it as part of the marketing slogan.
Slap a ribbon right on there.
By the way, speaking of my bad running jokes, listen, the league office doesn't take all my suggestions, but I want them to start listing ref height when you can look the refs up on the NBA official website.
Oh God.
I'm not sure about Ben Taylor's height. I don't know. Is he 6 feet? I don't know.
He's just creating more enemies.
If he's not,
got plenty.
If he's not, then I think we had a full sub 6 foot crew here.
I think Ben Taylor's over 6 foot.
Now, okay. I'll say this. I didn't think Luka's T was unjustified tonight. This is his third in 6 games so far. And boy, there was some patience for him not to get one against the Rockets the other night.
If you're complaining up 30 in the second half, you deserve a technical just for that. Just move the game along and get to the next game, please.
It was a multi-possession complaint. I'm sure there were a few words mixed in that were created.
I'm sure
I was
there
hoping
were.
after what happened last year with Luka, where he yet again completely lost his temper in a vitally important game and cost his team at the highest level. I was hoping he'd turn over a new leaf.
Work in progress. Work in progress.
He's on. Are you saying he's on pace for 41? He's on pace for 41 technical.
He's on pace to be. I just hope he's not. The suspension can't hit right before Christmas, because if it does, I mean, they got that Christmas showcase game with the Wolves coming to town. So. But yeah, he's on pace to get suspended around by Christmas.
Oh boy, bad weekend.
Slow down.
Bad weekend for the Pacers. They've now lost 2 players, 2 centers.
Yeah,
to torn Achilles this year. Isaiah Jackson, their backup big man. Already James Wiseman as well. And Aaron Nesmith suffered an injury over the weekend as well, who's super important to them.
Oh, he'd be guarding Luka when they're coming in here tomorrow night if he was healthy.
Yeah, I mean, he's the only plus perimeter defender they have on the team. I mean, it's a problem.
This is another thing about, I mentioned the Cavs. I mean, Indiana's a team that conference finals last year, they see themselves right there competing for one of those top 4 seeds. They're 2-4. We talked about Haliburton. We've already talked about Haliburton. Yeah. Halliburton's not playing.
But that's the whole thing, because if Haliburton's playing at the way he did before his injury last year, then they're an awesome offensive team that's still bad defensively, but they're so awesome offensively that they're still going to win a nice majority of their games. Okay, offensively is going to get the Pacers beat a lot.
Well, we wrote our for our piece on Friday, we talked to a bunch of people about Haliburton and whether he was, the thing I kept asking people is, do you think he's hurt or is he just off? Because obviously he's had all these injuries going back to when he slipped on the court in January against the Celtics. And the general consensus has been he just looks like he doesn't quite have the same level of confidence. And whether it's the same confidence to burst off that leg, whether it's just that his shot hasn't really gone in, whatever it is, the first couple of months of last season, like you said, Tim, the Pacers might have been the most fun team to watch in the league, and Haliburton was probably the most fun player to watch in the league individually. They were flying up and down. They were running all this crazy stuff with Buddy Hield. They were scoring 1 million points a game. They lit up the Celtics and the Bucks and the Sixers all in the Cup tournament going up to the championship game when they got smoked by the Lakers. But it was a huge coming out party for him, huge coming out party for them. And ever since he slipped, he hasn't looked the same. And you just watch these games this year, and it's just like he's not getting out of second or third gear, and he's not doing the same kind of pulling up from 30 feet kind of stuff he was doing last year when he was just
Well,
looking like some combination of Steph and Steve Nash at times.
He's shooting 24% on threes and only 34% overall. He's only averaging 14 points.
And his assists are way down. By the way, though, Bontemps, I am glad that his assists are down to 7.3. That's it's more than 3.5 fewer than last year. He led the league at 10.9.
By the way, I think Scottie Pippen Jr. is averaging 7 assists a game right now.
He's been a nice little,
Scottie Pippen Jr. is a nice player.
For the Grizzlies. Yeah,
really nice. As was Jay Huff. They've done a really good job the back half of their roster. Yes,
I mean,
I'm glad you brought up that notebook, the Bontemps Windy Friday notebook. Definitely recommend reading it every week for everybody. You guys, it's like this podcast without my bad dad jokes.
Without your jokes, yes.
But I just want to tell you guys, I was covering the Cowboys when T.O. accused Tony Romo and Jason Witten of drawing up plays behind his back, in the hotel room. There were road roommates and all that stuff. When I'm reading that damn column, I feel like T.O. seeing those plays that old Witten and Romo drew up. All those plays being drawn up behind my back.
Hey man, if you want to take over for me, you can go for it. I don't need an extra 7 hours on the phone a week that I am for that. I will say the Pacers did beat the Celtics.
I think he lost his voice.
Right. The Pacers did beat the Celtics last week in overtime. But even in that game, Haliburton was 7-19. That was a Pascal Siakam and Ben Mathurin show that night. So, yeah, they're, I don't know. If Luka can avoid getting in trouble with the refs, might be another rough night.
His buddy Rick's in town. Luka usually enjoys those reunions.
I suspect Luka will be dialed in for the second night of the back-to-back on Monday night. It's my prediction.
Mosley really was his buddy. And Luka kind of had I don't want to say get well, but Luka, by his standards, had been playing not very well at all. And, first quarter Luka, I always say Luka has these first quarters that would be like a nice line for a solid role player. And I forgot I think it was like 15, 5, and 3 in the first quarter of the night. So he's back to, if he's back to being that guy, then the Mavericks are going to be just fine.
We'll say on Friday, the Pacers lost to the Pelicans. The Pelicans needed that. I actually think the Pelicans have also played 7 games in 11 days now that I
and they've had 7 injuries in 11 days. My God.
They're right now. I'm not sure who they're starting at guard because
starting Jose Alvarado and Jordan Hawkins at guard.
But Jordan Hawkins has been having back issues. Like I think he's playing through stuff.
Well, but yes, who's starting? He's
right.
starting.
But I'm just saying They're
also playing BJ Boston now, Brandon Boston Jr. I believe.
Brandon Boston, who wasn't on the team a week ago.
And Javonte Green was in their starting lineup tonight when Zion sat out due to a right hamstring.
Yes, there was late hamstring tightness. He worked out and they didn't play. They were down tonight. Herb Jones, Trey Murphy, CJ McCollum, DeJounte Murray. Herb Jones, Trey Murphy, DeJounte Murray, CJ McCollum, and Zion Williamson.
So that's only 5 of their 6 best players.
Yes, it's kind of a problem.
And honestly, hopefully it's just a little tightness in Zion's hamstring. You see Zion and hamstring, and that is obviously but look, and they're going to be without Murray for few more weeks to come.
CJ McCollum's
that's weeks.
Herb Jones was weeks.
DeJounte Murray is weeks.
Yeah, Trey Murphy's probably, and he hasn't played.
Trey should be back, I think, fairly soon. But
but he hadn't played like literally. I think he did it the first or second day of camp. So
yes, it's also a hamstring injury. And Zion Williamson, to go back to the Joel Embiid thing from the beginning, is another guy that every time you watch him play, you're just holding your breath, hoping there's not another injury coming. And that was the first thing I saw today. When you see him, like you see the alert. Zion is now questionable with a hamstring tightness. It's like, eesh, here we go again. It's just, it's hard. It's really hard.
And they're in danger. I mean, they're 3-4 now, which credit to them for not. The winner of the Pacers, like you said,
it doesn't speak well to like the Bucks being 1-5.
Tell you, but you get off to a slow first month and a half in the West, and it's going to be real tough to have any postseason hopes.
They lost to the Hawks on Sunday. By the way, Jalen Johnson, the $150 million man, had 29, 9, and 8.
Yeah, he also had a dunk contest worthy dunk. That was kind of an exclamation point late in the fourth quarter.
Plus 32 in that one. By the way, Derek Lively tonight in Dallas, MacMahon. I think I saw he was plus 25 in 20 minutes.
He was good. Double off the bench.
He stays coming off that bench.
This is going to drive me insane until it changes.
You saw the Mavericks win up in Minnesota this last week. You also saw the Timberwolves get a really nice win over Denver. Was that Friday night?
It was Friday night. It was that was a wild one too, boy.
Yeah,
Sure
man, Rudy Gobert continues making friends.
Well, that was a game.
As many friends as you.
That was a game where Jokic, Michael Porter, and Aaron Gordon like all absolutely shot the lights out, and were all brilliant. Talk about three alphas.
Until crunch time, when the Nuggets couldn't buy one, and they blew a 10-point lead in the last 3.5 minutes.
Well, it shouldn't even be that close if those guys are playing as well. Let me look at their stats in that game. Well, was kind of an average game for Jokic, only 26, 9, and 13. That was actually below his averages.
Yeah, right.
Below his averages. Aaron Gordon goes for 31 and 11.
And look at the 3-point shooting on him.
5 of 7.
Yeah.
Michael Porter goes for 26, 6 and 4, shoots 11 of 18.
And we're great from 3-point range, which Porter gotten off to a slow start, but like his slow start was a make or miss kind of thing. And you figure over the course of time, if he's getting decent looks, he's going to hit a high percentage of them.
So Jamal Murray suffered a concussion in that game.
Yes, and that probably was a factor down the stretch. But Jamal Murray has gotten off to a tough start, and I don't know that it's just make or miss. He's always been a tough shot maker, but he's not moving as well. And those tough shots where they're pretty tightly contested are now extremely tightly contested. And look, their bench is abysmal. We've talked about that many, many times. If the Jamal Murray problem isn't solved, and the only way to solve it is he just gets back to the form that we've seen before. If he doesn't get back to that form, doesn't matter how bad their bench is, because they're not a real threat, as great as Joker is. Minnesota's interesting too, though, man. Minnesota Ant is I tell you what, almost every time you leave the locker room after Ant talks, you're cracking up. He is a character. There was a thing, and it got a little bit of attention on social media, where Gobert's talking after that game, and Ant comes in and peppered in. Ant's like a country version of Bernie Mac. I mean, he's loud, he's vain, he's hilarious, and he's coming in and he's hooting and hollering about this. An investigation needs to be launched. There's a conspiracy here. Joker's got a spy on the bench. He just confronted Micah Nori, the Wolves assistant coach, hilarious guy himself, known for the halftime interviews. Micah Nori was with Denver for a while. Him and Joker are like this. And he just confronted Micah Nori, talking about, how did Joker know our play? They apparently came out of a timeout in the fourth quarter. And as they're lining up to run a play, Joker starts pointing, telling his team, he's going here, and blew the play up, right? And Ant and Rudy are like, how the hell we haven't run that play in forever? How the hell did they know that? And, Ant's doing his thing where he's dropping MF for this and that and calling for investigations. So I go in there and I asked Joker about it, and Joker's like, I called out like 3, 4, 5 of their plays. Like we played them like 11 times last year, whatever. Like, I know all their plays, is basically what he said.
That's why he's the best.
Man.
That's why, as athletically limited as he is, he's actually not a bad defensive player, because he's 7 feet tall. He's a hell of a rebounder, and you ain't going to fool him.
Well, and he's just, I got to see him last week in person, and it's just, every time you watch him play, it's just a delight. Because it's just, he just makes it look impossibly easy. And I just every time he misses, I'm stunned. I just think it's going in every time, no matter where the shot's from. It's amazing to watch. A little concerning he's doing this in their 3-3 or whatever they are, but he's
they won on Saturday without Jamal Murray on a back-to-back.
I mean, against the Jazz, no disrespect, but
But disrespect.
well, and the Wolves went down and lost to San Antonio in a back-to-back when they got to the hotel at 4:15, and they didn't have a lot of
I will
juice.
say though, those are the kind of games we've talked
On
about
pace
it
for
some.
41 wins. Spurs, go on.
Yes, they are on pace for 41 wins. If they had played somebody besides the Jazz and one of
On
the other
pace for
games, they might
41
be on
wins.
pace
Go
for
on.
28. Look, those games back to back in San Antonio, like that's a game. Even though it's on a back to back, even though you get in at 4 a.m., that's a schedule loss. But that's the kind of game that if we look back in April and they're in a dogfight for seeding in the West, that's the kind of game that you're going to regret. And we've seen several of those happen already where teams have dropped games that, you'd like to have back, and they count all the same, whether they're now or in March.
So the great quote from Ant during his actual availability, instead of him interrupting Gobert's, was Dane Moore, who does a great job covering the Wolves on Twitter and with his podcast. He asked Ant, like, hey, what do you say to people? Ant at the time was averaging over 13 threes a game. It's down to like 12 and change now. He said, what do you say to the people who say you're taking too many threes? And Ant, without skipping a beat, goes, F them.
Well, he's also shooting like 40% on him too.
But yeah, 40 some odd percent. But he tagged the UCK on it, the F them. So, but just like that. And it's crazy. Ant is launching 12 and a half, 13 threes per game at a high clip. The majority of those are still off the dribble. And every once in a while, there are some, if you ask Finch about them, some of the ISO ones, maybe we could move the ball and get a little, something else there. But he loves the stuff off the pick and roll. He especially loves the fact that Ant's catch and shoot threes are way up. They're up like from about a little over 2 to like 4.5 a game. And a lot of that is playing off of Julius Randle, who plays that bully ball style. But he's not just looking to score; he's looking to spray the ball out. And they really like the early chemistry that those guys have developed. They've got to figure some things out on the defensive end with Randall coming in.
Well, let me just stop you right there. Yeah, Ant's shooting a lot of threes. He's got a mandate to do so. Maybe he shouldn't be taking 13, but
if you're shooting 43%, take 20.
I agree, but okay. The Timberwolves, issue right now, if you want to say they're an issue at 3-3, whatever. They were obviously the number one defensive team in the league last year. It's what powered them to the seed that they got in the West, the Western Finals. They traded Karl Towns, who is not a plus defender, although matchup wise against Denver.
Yeah.
And they are now, I think, 17th or 18th out of these first 6 games. They have plunged defensively. If you're going to look at something with Minnesota, that's what they got to be looking at.
Yeah, and some of it is just, getting Randall in there, getting him accustomed to what they're trying to do, and obviously also small sample size. They've had some bad transition defense, like the Mavericks were killing them.
I don't know where they are at the second. I think they were last in the league going into the weekend in transition defense.
Yeah, if Gobert's crashing the glass offensively, you've got to help him out in transition D, and Gafford had like 3 or 4, just sprint the floor dunks or layups in that Dallas game. And the other thing you said that Cat isn't a great defensive player, but what Cat was a decent second unit defensive big, right? But when he's playing against the second unit, he could be an okay defensive anchor. Not great, but against the second unit, okay, you're still big. They're playing Nas at the 4 then. When Gobert has gone off the court, their defense has been horrific. They are giving up almost 119 points per 100 possessions when Gobert's not on the court. So they've really got to kind of figure out how that's going to work, because he ain't going to play 38 minutes. So they've got to figure that out.
Well, the other thing that's interesting too, Jay McDaniel signed a big contract last summer and is an interesting player, but he's not been very good to start the year. They're getting smoked in the minutes he's on the court, and they're smoking people when he's on the bench. And I think it's just something to monitor.
Yeah.
Going forward.
Well,
Like,
and that
what is
definitely
that?
was, he was minus 27 when in the game that they beat Denver. So that's obviously going to skew the numbers when you've only got 6 games. But you're right. I'll just give you the number they got in front of me. They are minus 12.0 net rating with him on the floor, giving up
Oh my God, that's
120 points per 100 possessions, 119.9 actually. And when he's off the court, they are plus 16.6, only giving up 101.6. And that's the other
28 point per 100 possession swing. Now, obviously, it's only 6 games, but they're getting outscored by 47 points, 168 minutes, raw numbers, and outscoring teams by 40 points in 120 minutes with him on the bench. So again, it's just something to watch.
That reminds me of the other great Ant line, and this was not in the locker room, but he did the walk-off interview with I believe Cassidy. It was an ESPN game, and as he's coming down the hallway after going through the tunnel, he just repeated over and over and over, Nickeil Alexander, MF and Walker, B, but there was no abbreviations. Nickeil Alexander, MF and Walker, B. And his point was Nickeil Alexander, MF and Walker was awesome down the stretch of that game. Hit 2 huge threes, which Christian Brown blamed himself for defensive miscues on those, but was awesome defensively. You talk about, we've discussed this before, what an absolute gem of a move to get Nickeil Alexander Walker.
Again, I'm pretty sure that was a freebie, right? Like it
was in the Mike Conley trade.
Yeah.
It was a trade, where they unload the
D'Angelo Russell trade.
And he's become a phenomenal 3-and-D with some playmaking ability, just a critical bench player for them. That game was really fun too. What I ended up writing primarily about was the whole Christian Brown just absolutely. Woo! You talk about a poster dunk and Gobert's head. My goodness gracious! And then step towards Gobert, flexing and screaming. Gobert kind of, gave him a little forearm shove to the side of the neck, and there's a little brouhaha there. And Christian
Brown has had a very nice start to the year. For all the things we've said about Denver and about their depth, it has sort of been lost that he is a good player. The problem is they lost the other good player.
Yeah, you'll have some people there who say he's an upgrade. But he blamed himself for killing their momentum with the celebration. But no, Christian Brown's off to a great start.
The Nuggets will privately tell you Christian Brown right now is playing better than KCP.
Yes.
But
you don't have to privately do that. You can look at the numbers. But again, it's the issue of
right. But no one's playing better than Christian Brown in the role he vacated. By the way, scheduled, because who knows with court proceedings, but scheduled on Monday is the beginning of the arbitration between Glenn Taylor and Mark Lowry and Alex Rodriguez.
I didn't see A-Rod in my 2 games in Minnesota. Glenn Taylor was right there by the bench, baby.
Yeah. So they'll be there on Monday because I think the arbitration.
Was A-Rod at the World Series Friday?
Maybe.
World Series ended Friday, right? He was at the World Series.
The parade was on Friday.
Oh, right. Okay. So it's just when ended Wednesday or Thursday.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but this is a long drawn out story. I won't tell it all here. I actually have a FAQ that is running on ESPN.com Monday. You can look at it if you really care. But just so you know, there's going to be an arbitration hearing. It's supposed to take like most of the week. And then in 30 days, give or take, the arbitration is expected to rule who is in the right. Glenn Taylor, who said that that Lowry and Rodriguez didn't pay up on time and he vacated the sale and moved on. Or Lowry and Rodriguez, who said they should have had more time and who are coming to the arbitration, has been reported, and I am told, with $900 million in the bank account. They're ready to close the sale, the drop of a hat. The big key to this, and the thing that is intriguing, is that if Lowry and Rodriguez win, which is definitely a reasonable possibility because People who have read the contract tell me that they do have some standing. It doesn't necessarily mean they get the team. Where this is going to be fascinating is if Glenn Taylor wins, it's binding arbitration. It's over. He says he's not selling the team. They move on. Lorian Rodriguez win. It goes to a vote of the owners. And we have seen many things happen in the NBA over the 8 decades of the league when it comes to drama with owners fighting with each other, owners being forced to sell or pressure to sell, and owners in disputes and all kinds of things.
Owners selling the team, but still getting run basketball opera. Oh yeah, we didn't see that. We just heard that was going to happen.
Yeah. This is a potentially fascinating situation if Lorian Rodriguez win this case and it goes to a vote of the owners, and you have the owner contractually obligated to sell the team, because that's what basically the arbitrator would say, but saying, I don't want to sell the team.
And if guess what a bunch of people who own teams are probably not going to do? Make somebody sell a team if they don't want to.
I tell you what, though, then I'm sorry, give me back the money we already paid. With interest.
That becomes a different discussion.
That's not what they want.
I know.
That's right.
The reason this is fascinating from a business standpoint is that the Timberwolves agreement was done in 2021. The sales price is $1.5 billion. That's a lot of money. At the time, people thought it was an overpay. But since then, we've had 3 teams sell for over $3 billion, including a controlling share of the Bucks. The Hornets, I think, sold for around $3 billion as well. So the value of the according to Forbes, the value of the Timberwolves is now $3 billion. So if Lorian Rodriguez get the team, they will have doubled their investment before they even got the team. Because they'll bought it for 1.5 and it'd be worth $3 billion. So you can see why they're not interested in making a deal. They want to get it. So forget about all that. Forget about the intricacies of the court proceeding, all that stuff. We could be, a month or 2 away from there being like this showdown vote, or at least the showdown behind the scenes of the Board of Governors. Are we going to vote Glenn Taylor out to vote Mark Lowry? And by the way, Michael Bloomberg and Eric Schmidt, the former CEO of Google, who are now part of it in. So that's going to be going on this week. It will not affect Ant Edwards' 3-point volume.
I was going to say, you think Ant's losing a lot of sleep about that?
No.
Ant ain't coming down the hallway saying, Alex, MF and Rodriguez, B. I don't.
Do you think Ant cares about the 3 arbitrator panel that has been put together for this hearing?
Not one iota.
You think he'll stop by?
One iota.
To hear some of the arguments about contract law? All right. I've worked my way through this podcast. Hopefully by the next time we talk, my voice is stronger. Thank you for putting up with me. Yeah. Thank you to Bontemps. Thank you to MacMahon. Thank you to Jackson, our producer. Thank you for listening and watching the Hoop Collective. We'll talk to you later this week.
Adios, amigos.